You've heard it before. The stories, the warnings, the rumors. But what happens when the darkness becomes more than just a story? When the shadows in the corner of your eye aren't just figments of your imagination? Tonight I want to tell you about a house, one that's been standing for over a century. It's not the kind of place that looks haunted on the surface. No broken windows, no creaking floors. It's the kind of house that looks normal, at first, but you can't escape the whispers. It all started when Claire moved in. She'd been searching for a place of her own for months, and when she stumbled across the old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, it seemed perfect. Spacious, secluded, and cheap. Too cheap, maybe. But Claire didn't mind. She had always dreamed of living in a quiet, peaceful home away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The house stood at the end of a long, winding road, surrounded by trees that blocked out the sunlight during the late afternoon. It was beautiful in a strange, unsettling way. The faded blue paint, the ivy crawling up the side of the building, and the high, arched windows that seemed to watch her as she stood on the porch, keys in hand. Claire stepped inside, feeling a strange chill as she crossed the threshold. The floorboards creaked under her feet as she wandered through the entrance hall. The place was old but well kept. Everything seemed to be in order, just a little off. It wasn't just the silence. It was the air, thick and heavy with something that couldn't quite be named. The living room had a large fireplace, and across from it was a narrow door that led to the basement. She couldn't help but feel drawn to it. A strange compulsion tugged at her chest as she gazed at the closed door. Something told her she shouldn't open it. But she did. The basement was dark. Not the kind of dark that's simply the absence of light, but the kind of dark that feels alive. It pressed in on her, like a weight on her chest. Claire stood there for a moment, feeling the tension crawl up her spine before flicking the light switch. Nothing. She reached for the flashlight in her bag and turned it on, casting a weak beam of light around the space. The walls were lined with shelves full of old boxes and forgotten furniture covered in white sheets. But then, there was something else. A low, faint sound that seemed to echo from the walls. A whisper. At first, Claire thought it was just the wind, perhaps a draft from the old pipes. But as she listened closely, she realized the sound wasn't the wind. It was words, soft and unintelligible, like a conversation happening just out of reach. Her heart began to race as she stepped back toward the stairs, her breath quickening. It wasn't just the sound of the whispers that unsettled her. It was the feeling that someone was standing right behind her, watching her every move. The moment she turned to leave, the basement door slammed shut. She stumbled back, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the door handle, her mind racing. Why was she so frightened? It was just an old house, just some strange noises. But the whispering. It was growing louder, more insistent, coming from all directions now. "Let me in," one voice whispered, almost pleading. "Help us," another one rasped, barely audible but unmistakably desperate. Claire's hand finally found the door handle and she wrenched it open, escaping back into the light of the hallway. She didn't look back, not even once. The next few days passed in a blur. Claire tried to ignore the odd occurrences, but they wouldn't go away. The whispers, the cold spots that followed her from room to room, the feeling of being watched, even when she was alone. It was the third night when the dream started. It felt so real, as if she had never truly woken up at all. Claire found herself standing at the foot of the basement stairs, but this time it was different. The house was darker, colder. She couldn't see the walls, only the heavy blackness ahead of her. The whispers were back, but now they were clearer. "She's here," one voice said, its tone thick with malice. "She belongs to us," another hissed. Suddenly, Claire felt a cold hand grab her ankle. dragging her backward down the stairs. She woke up in a cold sweat, her heart racing, the room spinning. She gasped for air, staring at the darkened ceiling above her. It had been just a dream. That's all. But somehow, it didn't feel like it. The whispers lingered, faint but persistent, just beyond the edge of her hearing. That's when she realized something had changed. The house had changed her. Days turned into weeks. The whispers never stopped. In fact, they grew more frequent and more urgent. "Come back," they said. "We need you." Claire tried to leave. She tried to move out, but every time she packed a bag, she'd find herself standing back in the living room as if she'd never left. The house wouldn't let her go. One evening, she finally gave in. She had to know the truth. She had to understand what the whispers wanted from her. That night, she ventured back into the basement. The air was thick with tension, but this time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't the same Claire anymore. She had come to terms with it. The house had claimed her, and now she was one of them. As she descended the stairs, she heard the voice again, clearer than ever before. "You're home," it whispered. "Welcome back." Claire smiled as she stepped deeper into the shadows. And then, silence.